So, greenhouse movement. I get asked almost every day, what is greenhouse movement? And there are really a lot of answers, which is what confuses people. We are the church. We act a lot like the parachurch, but we're not a parachurch organization. We are the church. We are in the various dioceses of the Anglican Church in North America. Anywhere that someone is working with greenhouse movement, they're under the local bishop of ACNA. But because we care so much about the different language and ethnicities and cultures in America, we say yes to working with and partnering with folks who are not necessarily Anglican. Some people are intrigued by the Anglican Church. Some people are independent church workers, and they feel isolated and alone, and they want to be a part of a network of churches that are trying to reach the lost together. So we partner with independent Baptist, African American churches, or Latino churches, or Asian churches in the Chicagoland area, but beyond. And our first goal is to say you have to become Anglican before we can work together. Because as Anglicans, we're mere Christians. And so we want to partner with anyone who is trying to evangelize and reach the lost. We're also structured like a missionary society, like one of the great orders, the Franciscans or the Dominicans. Hey there, Bishop Keith. We want to not create a new jurisdiction by our network, but instead support and empower all of the different jurisdictions in the ACNA. And so we don't do ordination. We support the ordination process of leaders in various places. We don't steal leaders. People who want to become a part of Greenhouse don't move to join us. We actually train them and keep them where they are, serving in the church that they're in. And so we do a lot of lay leadership mobilization and equipping of lay leaders. Our vision is to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit together for the spontaneous expansion of the church. And what really inspired the vision of Greenhouse Movement was what happened in the East African Revival, where the gospel started spreading so rapidly and so quickly that lay leaders ended up starting congregations almost by accident and needed to be connected to and under the spiritual authority of ordained leadership. And so it led to the old way of understanding the word parish, that parish wasn't one congregation with one ordained leader with one vestry, but rather it was a group of congregations that were all under one rector. And so the three things that Greenhouse does is equip leaders, multiply churches, and empower movements. And I'll talk through each one of those, but I'd love for you to take a brief look at this brochure that hopefully you picked up at the door from Joel Brown, one of our lay pastors in the Chicago area. That first page sort of describes the explosive growth that happened in several of the countries in Africa that have helped and served those of us in the United States in the last 20 years so well. And it takes a look at the growth of the church, the spontaneous expansion of the church between 1970 and 2010. And we all know how much the African church has become leaders in the global South for us in North America, who have become somewhat spiritually malnourished, and how dependent we are on their spiritual leadership to show us the way forward. But what's happening in North America is relatively bleak in terms of the numbers of churches that are closing their doors. Something like 3,500 to 4,500 churches are closing in America every year. And the population growth is it's just exploding, and the church growth is not keeping up with the population growth. And so on page 3, you have the typical standalone church in America. We sort of treated each church like its own, its own entity. And it can partner with other churches, but in many ways there's a lot of sort of business wisdom out there that says focus on what you guys do so that you can keep getting better and bigger. And try to resist the temptation to do a lot of partnering, because it'll distract you and take your focus away. But in Greenhouse Movement, as well as in the Global South, the church looks a lot more like this. On the right-hand side, where one parish is made up of multiple congregations that are all led by lay leaders or deacons or priests, all under one rector, one priest who is the rector. And then there's a parish council like a vestry, but they have members of all of the different churches on it, so that they're not dealing with the carpet issue in the building for most of their meeting, or how to fix the air conditioning. They're talking more about how are we reaching this region that we're in, between the churches, the congregations within our one church. And so in order to do that, we have to equip leaders. And so one of the big concerns in North America is, how can you release lay leaders to start new congregations if they haven't been equipped well? One, it's hard to stop it if it's happening spontaneously. But we want to come alongside leaders where they have a vision to lead something, and they need some resourcing and some equipping. So here's what we do to equip leaders. One, we have developed an entire week-long training process for how to raise your own support. And friends, I've been in a lot of different missionary organizations where they teach you how to do this, and I love what we do. I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. We didn't design it. We borrowed it from Campus Crusade, now known as Cru, and they have the most number of support-raised missionaries in the world, and the most number of domestic support-raised missionaries, which is the hardest to raise money for. People traditionally think, I can support a missionary if they're going somewhere far away, but what about to the campus, or to the nursing home, or to that poor low-income neighborhood nearby? And so we train folks for a week on how to raise support, and then we provide all the back office supports for them, and they are sent to by the local church wherever it is that they're called to go, as long as they can stay connected under that local supervisor. So we had a woman who worked for Southwest Airlines out in California, and she had become a Christian a few years prior by this Anglican dean in Sacramento who shared the love of Jesus with her. But her real heart was to do event planning and administrative work. And she said, if there's any way that I could work for the Anglicans in Sacramento, I would, plan all their events and be the administrative assistant to the dean if you'll let me. And they said, we'd love that, but we don't have the resources for it. So they sent her to us. We trained her for 1 week. She went back, raised support, and she is now the full-time administrative support to an entire deanery, right? We didn't steal her. We just taught her how to raise her own resources and sent her back. So that's called the ministry partner development. And while folks are raising support, we provide them coaching until they finish 100% of their support raising goal. We coach them every week, holding them accountable, encouraging them, praying for them. The second is this online training program that we call St. Paul's House of Formation. It's made up of online cohorts led by our canon theologian in the Diocese of the Upper Midwest. His name is Canon Stephen Gautier, and he's one of the most brilliant minds with his wife Barbara on all things Anglican around the world, past and present. And I don't know anybody who knows that much and can hold it in their brains, but Canon Stephen is incredible. And if you go onto our website, you'll see the entire curriculum, the syllabus for 4 semesters of online cohorts that wherever you are around the country or the world, we have a cohort in Jordan where they get training in biblical studies, sacramental liturgical training, patristics and church history. We locally can send folks to like your standard evangelical seminary, but they can't get anything Anglican or sacramental or liturgical. But this provides that missing piece from a lot of the seminaries that we've sent our lay leaders to get more training and education. We also provide this ministry of pastoral care and healing ministry training called Equip to Heal. through various weekend conferences around the country. We just did one in Phoenix this last weekend. We have one coming up in Indiana in November, in Holland in November, and then Los Angeles next March. And so we provide 10 to 12 training sessions for folks who want to grow in how to pastor into some of the more difficult issues of our day. If we're going to reach the lost, we have to be prepared as a church and as lay pastors and ordained pastors how to handle the brokenness in a lot of these young people's lives as they come to us. And there are some really difficult situations that even seminary isn't equipped to help pastors learn how to minister healing into their situations. And then last, we have a Latino ministry coaching cohort with 6 group coaching sessions for those that are really desiring and have a vision for building the bridge between the Anglo and the Latino cultures and how to minister into bringing these two together in North America. The next thing that we do with multiplying congregations is because the way of planting a church doesn't have to be take 100 people from your existing church, send them away somewhere nearby to start a new church. Most of the churches in the ACNA are under 100 period, just average Sunday attendance. So a lot of the traditional ways of planting churches doesn't work for 99% of our churches because of small numbers of people and small resources. But that doesn't mean that these churches can't multiply. So what we do, Joe Brown, will you come on up here? Joe Brown is a lay pastor who was attending our church, and he had a heart for this facility, this care facility, nursing home in the city of Chicago, and he is currently leading an Anglican Word and Sacrament service in this care facility that has no gospel presence, no Sunday service being sent to it. And so, how long have you been doing this, Joel?
So since last October.
And do you get a lot of money from the church to be able to support your ministry?
We get about $80.
Awesome. So how do you resource your ministry?
We don't actually require a lot, which is nice. We're pretty much just printing bulletins and coming up with, communion supplies and things like that. But
what about your own personal support?
I raised all my own support because the nursing home, it's an underfunded nursing home, and so they're not going to cover me for any of that. So it's what's made it possible is doing the whole MPD process through.
And what's happening in the next year in terms of multiplication?
Well, that's a little bit of work in progress, but working on a lot of oral Bible storying actually with the nursing home residents, just because they have lots and lots of time and are really eager to hear about the Lord and receive comfort from Him. So really, just even on the local level, trying to figure out how to do that strategically, and then just seeing what other regional churches in our parish can do to come alongside, help other nursing homes in the area. So.
And has a young man come to you recently asking if you can do what you're doing?
Yeah. We've had an intern, a guy applying for an internship with us from Moody. So we'll see. It's looking like things are moving forward. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joel.
Yeah.
Joel is part of the staff team of a parish which has multiple congregations on the north side of the city of Chicago. I happen to be his boss, so I love this guy. And his heart for the underserved and those who just are, hungry. There's a lot of hunger. But we don't think of the sort of locations around the country that can sustain church plants as a prerequisite for starting a new work. So we think of all the places church plants wouldn't go, which are nursing homes or college campuses or poor or low-income neighborhoods where the resources may not sustain necessarily a full-blown church, but we can, as a parish of multiple congregations, be able to get the gospel in through gatherings that are congregations. They are people gathering for word and sacrament. So it doesn't matter where or what context, but we are constantly trying to catalyze these new works, these new congregations. We call the lay pastor who's leading that we're equipping, and he or she is under the spiritual authority of the rector. We call them different things in different places. So in Chicagoland, we call them a catechist, a lay catechist. On the West Coast, the Diocese of Western Anglicans is doing this. They're calling them lay missionaries. And then if we're in sort of a more evangelical environment, lay pastor tends to be the word that we use, or location pastor, one person has been working on. And so they all report to the rector and operate as a staff team over a region, which is really exciting for us. Last, we empower movements, which are these different ministries that catalyze and bring that catalytic DNA. So one is the Equip to Heal ministry. Another you may have heard of, they're doing 2 map talks called Caminemos Juntos, which means let us walk together, and it's a gathering of all of the Spanish-speaking Latino congregations in North America and in South America, as they do 2 events a year on both continents. Another one you may have heard of is United Adoration, a gathering of musicians and artists to write new music for the church. We believe that you can't have revival without new songs. And so they are eagerly and actively working. Another one is building the reciprocal mission partners with other Anglican churches across seas, sending missionaries to each other and helping each other evangelize and train leaders. So that's the end of my TED Talk. And I wanted to make sure that you knew that the 3 things I handed to you, the Greenhouse Vision brochure is the one we walked through a little bit. The second one is how to get someone trained at Greenhouse for a week and sent back to you, equipped, resourced, raising their own support perhaps. We do that 3 times a year through launch weeks, and those dates are up here on the board. And the last is just a contact card to get more information from Greenhouse if you're interested. Thank you. All right, what questions do you guys have? Yeah.
I'm a pastor of a small church, and we are discerning about planting a church. And I'm finding a lot of resources for people who want to be a church planter.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot out there for the churches that want to raise up the support to hire a church.
How does a church raise support?
Well, and I'm trying to educate the church as a whole about church planting, and I'm just not finding a whole lot of resources. Does Greenhouse have anything for that?
You know, what we have found is that people love to support people. And so we have found that through the process of support raising that we've done in Greenhouse, where individuals ask their network to support them, that we get a lot more response than, say, raising support for a fund that doesn't necessarily have specificity to it. But some churches have managed to do this well, but we don't offer training for that in terms of how does a church raise money for a fund to support a new thing. But if you find them, let us know.
Okay.
Yeah, Jared.
Does St. Paul's House of Formation, do they offer different levels of training? So let's say someone who is going to be some kind of a lay leader in the church, but is not going into any kind of intense regular ministry, but is just kind of volunteering,
Yes.
but also needs training.
Yeah, it's open to all folks. Even our parishioners are so excited by it that they take it. And so you don't have to be in a ministry leadership process in order to be a part of one of the cohorts. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely open to anyone. Because our canon theologian wants everyone to know what he's teaching. You know, it's really good stuff. So, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Great.
So all the education that we were talking about, is it online?
So it's an online cohort that you have to sign up for, and there's a registration process. So we begin them at the beginning of semesters. So the fall semester has already begun. The next opportunity to join one is in January.
The Word and Table podcast.
So the Word and Table podcast is 20-minute episodes led by the same people, right? The Word and Table podcast is just a podcast you can find online that's completely free. Same two people are leading that podcast, so you can hear, they're basically like teasers to torment you with just a little bit that makes you hungry for more. And then the St. Paul's House formation is something that you would register for.
And how is the training for Kenyan and pastoral care? Is that part of the program?
Yeah, so right now that's not online yet. We just started the St. Paul's House formation a year ago, and so we're wanting to get all of our methods of training in the same format, but this is mostly conference-based, gathering people together for a weekend like this.
Is the information will be online?
In terms of when the next ones are and how to register, yeah. There's a Facebook group called Equip to Heal that you can join that's constantly putting out their conference days. And there's a little Equip to Heal flyer up here that you can grab. Awesome.
Keith,
Matt
so
Woodley?
as a great example of what you guys do, a really concrete example, I think this is a good one. So I visited one of the greenhouse church plants in the West Loop, Cornerstone West Loop,
Yep.
which started at University of Illinois, Chicago, right?
Yep.
So tell people a little bit about that story, because it's really, I was on sabbatical, so I went there.
Yeah.
I had a great experience there, but
I'm not so... do you want to tell that story, Colin?
Of how I'll start it?
Yeah.
it started on campus, right?
Well, it started like just off campus, yeah. So
Okay.
we started meeting in an apartment. Well, they didn't start two things at the same time. They started a church on campus, and they started a church meeting in someone's apartment, like Nate Beasley's apartment, or no, not Nate Beasley, apartment in nearby the school. And from there, expanded to two congregations in the West Loop and in the Bridgeport neighborhood of Chicago. And so now, I guess that like a couple people and a few college students is now 3 congregations, maybe 150 or so, across college campus, and then just 2 like working
Yeah.
professional.
The broad story is 10 years ago, there was not an ACNA church in the city of Chicago with 2.7 million people and only 600,000 going to church every Sunday. And then a young Northwestern student named Mike Niebauer came to the nearby Anglican church on the northwest suburbs and said, "Can I start something at Northwest University?" And so the rector there said, "Yes, I'll be your connect to the church." And he went on campus, he started gathering students, they became a congregation, and then within a few years, their students graduated, and while the congregation continued, and that leader became a priest, he raised up another leader to be the lay pastor, and he took the graduating students, and they went into the city, and they planted the first ACNA church in the city, and that's my parish. I inherited that parish, and they started a congregation at the nursing home, 2 nursing homes, and another hipster congregation in Logan Square. And so that group of Northwestern students, they never gathered more than 50 students for a worship Sunday, but they planted 4 congregations that still exist. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So yeah, Heather.
How do they deal with the sacraments?
Yes, that's a great question. How do they deal with the sacraments? So we have several priests in the city, but we still have lay-led services. And at a lay-led service, we do the authorized by our diocese the distribution of reserved sacraments by the lay pastor who's licensed to do the distribution. So there is no lay presiding in our network, but they have that permission. Just like if you were to take reserved sacrament to a hospital visit, this happened in the 1st and 2nd century before priests could celebrate communion. Only bishops could. And so back then they had priests, but priests couldn't consecrate, and the bishops consecrated, and then they had fresh bread runners take the consecrated bread out to the outlying villages where there were increasingly multiplying congregations. And so it's sort of based on that similar concept of fresh bread being taken out from where the priest is celebrating and consecrating out to the areas that don't have priests to distribute it. Does that answer your question, Heather? Yeah. So there's strict practices around how we handle and how we distribute the bread and the wine. That's part of our training. What's interesting is at Joel Brown's facility, they don't allow wine or grape juice, just because of the special needs. So it's only communion in one kind in his congregation.